Hello, my dudes. Welcome back to my series, Internet Analysis. Can we have a nuanced conversation about nuance? One thing about me, I love nuance. And that probably sounds annoying because it's become a bit of a buzzword. Oh, nuance. Really though, in life in general, I cannot help but consider all angles. I joke it's because I'm a Libra. I love balance and fairness. However, very importantly, that does not mean that I weigh all information equally. Because of course, some things are true, facts, expert opinions, and there's a lot of BS. So you've got to be discerning. I get very frustrated by the lack of nuance, especially online, because I think it's a big factor in why we seem so incapable of communicating with and understanding each other. People are so quick to jump in and be like, I'm smart, you're dumb, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. I find myself scrolling through comment sections feeling secondhand anger and frustration just from witnessing other people's arguments and misunderstandings. And every time I'm trying to see what's going on and I'm like, what is wrong with people? I keep coming back to this question. What's not clicking here?
Because there's no space for nuance on the internet conversation, so much of posting on here feels like trying to talk about calculus to someone that has only passed basic arithmetic.
Why does everybody lack nuance? Oh, if I say the apple is red, they're like, well, you didn't say it was green.
I'm trying to talk about issues of morality and context and all this stuff. And people are like, well, what about this? Woke. We can't even have discussions. We can't even talk about it.
Why aren't people understanding the nuance? Two things can be true at once. Everyone wants to oversimplify things. And I only recently realized, quite obviously, how much of this actually comes down to the literacy crisis. Yes, some of these comments are from kids, and some kids can't read, but this is a problem with plenty of adults too. So initially, actually, my script was about this issue. People aren't getting it because they're genuinely not comprehending the information. They're struggling with reading and listening skills. And that's not a dig. This literacy crisis is a huge systemic problem.
Learning that there are a ton of people who do not understand nuance and they don't understand subjectivity. They don't know how to infer. They don't think of context when they're hearing things. And they think that in order for nuance to exist, it has to be stated, when I feel like you should know that nuance is implied a lot of times.
Nuance is something that is taught when you read books. If you read a lot or if you engage in a lot of arts, nuance is something that is it's an unsaid thing. It's assumed.
Then you add in the increasing reliance and addiction to chatbots. So many people who are already struggling to read and think critically are actively offloading their brain power to an LLM. A lot of videos have been made about this already, but I might still cover it in the future because I think about it every day. So anyway, I realized the script was changing paths, heading down this direction, because so long I wanted to get into bean soup theory, the whataboutism online, because those are also a major part of the misunderstandings and the nonsensical discourse. But at the root of it all, I really do think a foundational problem is the lack of nuance. I feel like so many of us want to promote and encourage nuance, but when it comes down to it, we often don't actually want to hear it. Myself included. Because it does get messy, it gets unclear, it gets confusing. Nuance for me, not for thee. So let's dig in. And yes, I know a lot of people hate when creators hold lapel mics. I know, this can clip onto my shirt. Guess what? It sounds different. How does this sound? And most importantly, does it look stupid? Does it look like there's a big fluffy bug on my shirt? So we're just gonna have to live with it, okay? It's fun. It's fun to have something to hold on camera. Let's start with why we like binary thinking. Throughout this episode, I'm gonna be using some terms interchangeably. Dichotomous thinking, binary thinking, black and white thinking, as in there are only two absolute options. Good, bad, right, wrong, all or nothing. Essentially, people like simplicity. Humans have evolved to make snap judgments. Sorting things and people into straightforward categories has been part of our survival. Predator or prey? Kevin Dutton writes, there are three super categories: fight, flight, us, them, right, wrong. And he argues that the world's super persuaders rely heavily on these. Quote, frame your message such that 1, it makes a person want to fight for a cause. 2, it appeals to a sense of group identity. And 3, it makes people feel that it's morally right to support you. Obviously, by keeping things super simple and straightforward, more people can easily understand you. There is a huge incentive not to get bogged down by nuance. Keep it simple, silly. Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, okay, I get it. Simple is good. But what's wrong with sprinkling a little nuance on top? More information can only be a good thing, right? Well, here's why we don't like nuance. All of us know that most things are not actually black and white. There are a lot of gray areas. And yet, nuance gets a lot of hate. Uncertainty makes us uncomfortable. Sapphire writes, nuance is a subtle difference in meaning. It began in Middle French, meaning a shade of color, rooted in the Latin for cloud. An offshoot is nebulous, cloudy, vague, obscure. That may explain why nuance has recently gained a pejorative nuance, variability, ambivalence, equivocation. Sharing a complex, nuanced take can seem unclear. What's your point? What's your one singular stance? Let's say we get into a heated debate about a controversial political issue. I'm gonna want to know right away, are you for or against it? What team are you on? Giving a more nuanced take can be dangerous socially. It's risky because it opens you up to being misunderstood or misconstrued.
I need somebody to tell the neurotypicals that not every observation is a fucking endorsement. That me discussing context or nuance does not mean I align with said ideology. Me giving context is like me opening a tab in my brain and inviting discussion.
Online, in addition to the fear of being misunderstood or mischaracterized, we're also afraid of being clipped. What if one point you make gets taken out of context and people run with it? Suddenly you're the bad internet person of the day. Hence why it's just easier and less risky to simplify your position as much as possible. There's less room for error. Now, if you're a nuance lover, you probably think that sharing a nuanced take makes you seem more thoughtful. But often, people just perceive you as lukewarm and lacking conviction. This study from the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology focused on ambivalence, having mixed or even contradictory feelings about something. They clarify, ambivalence does not preclude people from taking an overall position on one side or another, but is determined when people can accept points on both sides or do not agree wholeheartedly with all supporting points for a position. The study found that people who express ambivalence about political topics ranging from mask mandates, immigration, and the death penalty were not only disliked more by those who had different political opinions as them, but they were also unpopular with people who largely held the same beliefs, but felt like their position isn't strong enough. And here's the thing, I totally understand feeling frustrated about this. There are many issues I feel very strongly about, and it hurts my soul and sometimes infuriates me to hear people have like a moderate position on them. Frankly, I'm a big centrist hater, so I get it. But I still find it very interesting psychologically that having mixed or conflicted feelings can be so polarizing. Largely because I think if we're honest with ourselves, many of us experience having mixed feelings often. But again, we don't want to voice it for fear of social risk. But I do want to be clear, having a nuanced take on something does not always equal ambivalence, though a lot of people kind of absorb them as the same. So essentially what I came away from this section with is that it makes a lot of sense. If we're worried that we're going to be punished socially for nuance, might as well avoid it. Now let's get into why I am pro nuance. I'm realizing I should probably explain what I mean by nuance, but it's harder than I thought. I'm like, nuance. It's everything. It's everywhere.
And every time somebody is like, yeah, but it's a lot more nuanced than that, I'm like, you're so right. It is. It's so much more. I never had a word for it. I always wanted to be like, it's so much more something than that.
To me, nuance is about being open-minded to more information. It's knowing that multiple things can be true at once, and ultimately trying to have a greater understanding of whatever issue. That's not to say that more nuance will always change my mind. I can still have my own strong opinion, but nuance just adds extra context, some more color and flavor to a discussion. Whether we're talking about beauty standards, the Olivia Rodrigo baby doll dress, tipping culture, whatever. Bring on the nuance. To be specific, more nuance to consider might include historical context, intersectional analysis, CRT, or examining an issue through a specific lens like feminist theory, queer theory, Marxism, disability. When I write these videos, I like to dig into a topic. It really is about the journey. At the end of the day, I'm less interested in what my conclusion is, like my scalding hot take. And I know that some viewers see that as a weakness, an inability to commit, pick a side. You're just trying to make everyone happy. And to be clear, I do make these videos from my perspective. I filter everything through my personal lens. And I never want to claim that my videos are objective, neutral, unbiased. Reporting No, this is commentary. Very much influenced by my biases, beliefs, and politics. But that is exactly why I love wading through the nuance. Let's consider this topic. What are people saying? How are they engaging with each other? What does it all mean? It is very complicated and messy often, but that is what's fascinating to me. Now, let me share an example. Here's a no nuance hot take that I've heard many times online. Poor people shouldn't have kids. I'm just like, how could you possibly just say that without considering all the other layers related to this argument? I get it, hot takes are supposed to be controversial, but I cannot let that sentence stand on its own. I obviously agree that all children deserve to be well taken care of and loved. Of course, it would be ideal if every parent was perfectly prepared financially and emotionally. Unfortunately, that is not the case for many families. And I agree, it is unfair and traumatizing for children to grow up in poverty. But are we going to think of this as an individual failure of a poor person or as a systemic problem? Firstly, I don't think you can say that without considering reproductive rights and whether people have the freedom to control having children or not. Secondly, people's circumstances may change. Maybe a family was doing well. They had stable, good-paying jobs, plenty of savings. They owned a home. So they decide to have kids. Well, what happens when, due to no fault of their own, the economy crashes, inflation skyrockets, they lose their jobs, and they burn through their savings because this country has little to no social safety nets? But aside from that, this take ultimately to me reads as gross, anti-poor, obviously, and there's so much historical context to consider. Who is most likely to be poor in this country? Marginalized people, Black people, disabled people. And if you're arguing that those groups shouldn't be allowed to have kids, ooh, we're in eugenics territory now. I hope that's not what you meant. Essentially, instead of framing this as poor people shouldn't have kids, which implies that we should criminalize and punish poverty or restrict reproductive rights even further, yikes, how about we focus on fixing the actual root problem? How do we guarantee that no children live in poverty? My hot take would be it is the government's job to ensure that all children are well taken care of, fed, housed, educated, safe, regardless of their family's income. But actually, scratch that. Literally everyone deserves it. And there's so much more I could say. I could write an entire episode on this, but I just wanted to share this as a small example to hopefully illustrate why I believe nuance is valuable and necessary. But before we continue, this portion of today's video is sponsored by Quince. I've been intrigued by Quince for a while, so I'm excited to get the chance to check them out. When I started shopping, I was looking for staple pieces that I can wear year-round, and I was also paying attention to materials. I found a lot of cotton, linen, silk, cashmere. So let's get into the pieces. I've got to say this one is my favorite. The Fisherman Boxy Cropped Cardigan in Big Sur Green. First of all, I love a cardigan. I've been wearing this or reaching for it on a daily basis. It's 100% organic cotton and it's very heavy, so it feels substantial. It's a winner. I am also wearing the Bella Stretch wide leg jeans. This is the color Frosted Blue. And lucky for me, these pants come in multiple washes. I got the green as well. It really is the perfect amount of stretch to where it feels comfortable. I can wear these all day long, and I have been. They don't stretch out and they don't feel like jeggings. You can see how this has become my uniform. It's so easy. And look at this sweater. The cropped cotton polo sweater. Again, they are really nailing the length. This is the crop I want. A little crop. It's 100% organic cotton as well. Look at this collar. The fit is just so cute. I can throw this on. It's casual, it's cool, but it's also different. Something a little fresh. Best of all, I can mix and match these pieces year round so I can maximize their use. That's the goal. If you'd like to check out Quince, you can click the link in my description. They offer free shipping and 365-day returns. Throughout this video, it is crucial to emphasize that allowing space for nuance does not stop you from having strong beliefs, convictions, or opinions.
I think since I've spent so much time doing a lot of introspection and really deconstructing a lot of my ideals, I feel like I sound sometimes a little bit morally gray or like I'm contradicting myself or a little bit of a hypocrite. When you understand the nuance and that life can exist in gray areas and that two truths can coexist, that sometimes it sounds like you are constantly changing your mind, but it's not because I don't stand for anything, because I definitely have things that I firmly believe and and stand on.
Though I know that when some people hear nuance, they think that means we're calling for complete objectivity and neutrality. Ooh, an enlightened centrist who can put their feelings aside and focus on the facts. Be nuanced, be moderate. And obviously I disagree with that. Others hear nuance as just an empty, meaningless buzzword, a signal that someone's about to spout some pseudo-intellectual nonsense.
The word nuance has become something of a buzzword in the past couple months on TikTok that people kind of have lost the meaning of.
When I see the word nuance on this app, I know it's about to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, because it often isn't contributing to whatever discourse that they're adding nuance to. It's oftentimes this person who puts on this posture and then just says, well, both sides are wrong, and they add this exacerbation in their voice to imply that they're higher in this discourse and that they're actually above it all, and then they say jack shit.
So yeah, nuance itself is neutral. It is not inherently correct or good. You always have to think critically when considering it. Next up, let's discuss why it is so hard to have nuanced conversations online.
We are effectively encouraged to avoid it as creators, and that is a real shame because I love nuance. And it is just easier when you have a concrete idea about something and you can repeat it multiple times because it just helps you create this personal brand.
Social media encourages simplicity, as we know. People might not listen to you for more than half a second before they scroll. So quick hot takes are a great way to catch attention and encourage engagement. This viral da-da-da is the best. This new album is trash. Again, black and white thinking is encouraged. Make your opinion clear immediately. And because everything is short form, you just have to neatly summarize your thoughts and feelings in 140 characters or less. But what if you have a more complicated take? What if you want to add some context, some more information that people might be missing? What if, God forbid, you have mixed feelings? As I mentioned before, sharing a nuanced take is a big risk. Having people not get you, not get your point, or twist your words can be very painful. So be sure to include a million disclaimers. That'll do the trick. Even though, to be clear, this is just my personal opinion and I'm not saying that, and I hope it doesn't sound like this. Believe me, as creators, we are sick of disclaimers too. It is very frustrating, but they feel necessary as a defense mechanism. Even if you know a lot of people are going to misunderstand you regardless.
Every time I go to film a video, I keep thinking of all the ways that people are going to disagree with me. And the nuance police are exhausting. So what about my nuance is implied. When I'm speaking, the people I interact with my day to day, it is implied that it all depends. Critical thinking is applied before words are even uttered. We know multiple things can be true. We know everything is everything. That's what I say. I'm everything is just everything. Nuance.
We shouldn't have to blatantly say in every single post, this is my opinion. I know other people think differently and that's okay and that's valid, You'd think we would all get that, right?
You could say anything at all. You could say, based on my personal experience, this is my thought. And there's always comments well, this isn't the case for everyone. That is implied. I would never assume that everyone's situation would be the same as mine. I feel it's implied that there is nuance and subjectivity and context that changes everybody's situation. Why is that not a normal thing?
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you decide to skip the disclaimers, there's gonna be some people who are wow, so you think you have the only correct opinion in the world? And on the other end, if you have too many disclaimers, you just end up watering down your point, making your argument less effective or less clear, and people are gonna call you annoying. So, ironically, often the more information or nuance you try to include, the more misunderstood you'll be. You're kind of just offering up more points for people to potentially disagree with. So, in our quest to increase understanding, we might do the opposite. And one, that can be due to our own failure. Maybe we're not arguing our points well enough. We need to practice. But two, sometimes the audience just isn't comprehending it, no matter what you do. And that brings us to bean soup theory. Even if you post the simplest thing, people will misunderstand you or try to say that you're wrong. Whenever I reference bean soup theory, I assume everyone knows what it is, but if you don't, basically a woman posted a TikTok, a recipe for bean soup. Iron rich, delicious. But then she got a couple comments from people asking, what if I don't like beans? Huh? So bean soup has now become a shorthand, perfectly embodying these strange but incredibly common online interactions. You post a curly hair routine, and someone comments, "This is useless. I have straight hair." You tweet about the simple joy of having coffee with your husband in your garden, and people are enraged because they don't have that coffee husband or garden. How inconsiderate.
Most people don't get to go out to dinner on a weekday, and this is really rude of you to show cocktails in the middle of the week. What a bunch of drunks. This is setting unrealistic expectations. Not everybody has friends. Not everybody lives close to a restaurant.
Bean soup is a type of whataboutism. What about me? How dare a stranger post something that doesn't perfectly align with my individual lived experience? And I've thought a lot about this, and I'm like, what is the problem here? Is this due to people just being really self-centered or even narcissistic? Is it some kind of entitlement? The thought that everything you come across online should literally be catered for you? Well, the way we're going with technology and Apple wanting to like read our minds, we're gonna be there soon. In response to these bean soup kind of comments, many people just say, if it's not for you, keep scrolling. Simple as that. If you don't like something, you can't relate, whatever, you actually don't have to leave a comment and let everyone know.
So if I say to people, if you don't teach your children how to read, they get dumber, do not come to me and say, well, I have dyslexia. Well, I have this learning disability, so that's why I can't read. I'm not talking to you.
This is where I'd argue bean soup falls under the umbrella of not comprehending nuance. In a way, bean soup is part of dichotomous thinking. Things either reflect me and are therefore right, or they're not me and wrong. I found this fantastic piece on Substack, and it connected to so many angles that I wanted to touch on. Highly recommend giving it a read. Abedawale writes, when someone writes an essay, a note, or a social media post exploring a particular viewpoint, there's a pervasive need for others to dismantle it, often without fully engaging with it, instead of understanding that the person is sharing one lens or angle, sometimes exploratory, sometimes speculative. Readers leap to assume the piece is prescriptive or universal. So the bean soup problem and not allowing space for nuance, I think they're two sides of the same coin. There's this compulsion to correct people, even when they're talking about their opinions or personal experiences, or chiding them for what they missed, according to you. Because if someone doesn't mention every single thing ever, they're wrong. Abedawale writes, I wrote an essay on masculinity and the concept of performative males. Then I received a long message detailing what the person believed I had missed. What struck me wasn't the disagreement, but the lack of nuance. It seems online, the moment someone dislikes a person or concept, they shut down the possibility that it might be useful, reframed, or understood from a different angle. It is the internet's one-track thinking at its finest. If they don't like it, it cannot possibly be valid in any other lens. To be clear, I do think adding context, or hey, nuance, in the comments can be helpful, of course. But there's like a way of going about it. Hey, have you heard of XYZ thing? Ah, this is relevant. I think you'd find this interesting. I recommend this book or this movie. Or you can say like, oh, I actually disagree in my experience, da-da-da-da. Rather than framing a comment like, wow, you didn't even mention the Pythagorean theorem. You clearly didn't do any research. This essay's a joke. My favorite thing is when someone's like, wow, can't believe you didn't mention this, but the person actually did. And you either commented too early or you missed it because you didn't pay attention. Abedawale writes, this issue is inseparable from the widening crisis of comprehension and functional literacy. Misinterpretation of stories is spreading because the cognitive muscles required to comprehend tone, context, inference, and complexity have atrophied. Even simple statements are flattened into extremes because many users never truly process what they're reading. The internet didn't create functional illiteracy, but it certainly amplified it, exposing how many people can read text while entirely missing its meaning. I do think it's a major problem to approach everything with this combative nature. I'm right, you're wrong. Again, it's dichotomous thinking, trying to oversimplify and boil everything down to, is this right or wrong, good or bad? That's why I keep just beating the drum. I'm like, things are more complicated. There's nuance. All of that being said, I definitely want to acknowledge that many people have a different relationship with the idea of nuance, especially in this current socio-political context. Calls for nuance can feel dangerous. Nuance can be used in bad faith or weaponized.
Nuance has become the latest devil's advocate, and now I feel like people are similarly using nuance as a way to platform and legitimize opinions that are rooted in all the isms, all the phobias.
People can try to deflect from their wrongdoing under the guise of nuance. Like, yeah, I technically cheated on you and burned your house down, but it's more complicated than that. There's nuance.
I have been a victim of weaponized nuance. The gray areas have been used to make me doubt the things I've seen or my reality. So as a defense mechanism, I started getting used to being blunt, getting used to being very it's this or this.
You can be gaslit to think you don't know enough. You don't know what you're talking about.
Nuance about the genocide in Gaza, the occupation in Minneapolis, imperialism in Venezuela and everywhere else.
No, you can't have strong feelings about this. You clearly don't understand the depth or the nuance of the history. It's like, oh, I'm pretty sure no amount of nuance would justify genocide or bombing schools, for example. So again, I want to be very clear. Nuance is not objectively right, fair, or true. Nozick writes, don't even get me started on the weaponization of two truths. Because yes, two things can be true, but if one of those things is rooted in mis and disinformation, anti-science, then agree to disagree.
As we see the rise of pseudo-intellectualism, I think it's important to remember that nuance is about depth and asking better questions, not seeing how far or shocking of an opinion you can have.
Just because nuance is added doesn't mean you have to agree with it or accept it. To me, nuance is information, okay? It's completely neutral. But when we feel unsafe, we seek clarity.
I think people are losing the ability to hold nuance or the idea that multiple things can be true at once because we're losing safety overall as a society.
Things are a mess, the world is terrifying, which makes people lean further into dichotomous thinking. When we're in survival mode, again, nuance can feel dangerous. We need straightforward answers. Is this safe? Is it right? Are you on our side or not?
When we are in fight or flight, we cling to ideas of control. We cling to things that make us feel like we have some sort of semblance of some kind of organization in this chaotic world. And so part of that is putting people in groups. Part of that is being able to say, oh, this influencer I like, they're in the good category. This influencer I don't like, they're in the bad category.
When you're overwhelmed, you simply don't have the brain power or the energy to think that deeply about everything. When I was researching about black and white thinking, I was reminded that black and white thinking is very common in many conditions, including BPD, OCD, and autism, to name a few.
There's no way I could possibly be autistic. I don't have black and white thinking. Whoa, what are you doing? You're doing this completely wrong. What do you mean I'm doing this wrong? There's no wrong way to do it. Yeah, but there's a method you have to follow. But it's gonna turn out the exact same no matter what. But my method is the correct method.
Growing up as an autistic kid, my black and white thinking was so strong, and being such a literal thinker, I am interpreting this exactly as two things. Everything was characterized by a factual rule that was either fully correct or fully incorrect.
Though autism is an interesting case because, as this creator noted, while she experiences black and white thinking, autistic people can also require more clarity.
We struggle with black and white thinking, right? All or nothing thinking. I'm either going to be perfect at it or I'm not doing it at all. Yet, we're the ones asking 100 clarifying questions to everyone else's black and white answer question. Those questions they give you on screening tests for autism that say, would you rather be in a library or a club? And you're like, okay, what's the context? Where am I at? Who am I with? What time is it? Am I on vacation? What are we doing? How can I just answer that? Autism is just living with contradictions constantly.
I found that really fascinating. And I think this is a very interesting example of nuance in and of itself. So I totally understand why many of us have inclinations toward dichotomous thinking, especially when it comes to what we consider moral issues. What about nuance in media and politics? Nuance can be deadly. The people demand a 5-second soundbite, not a 10-minute rambling response. In a political campaign, candidates must have simple, catchy slogans. Make your policy positions brief and clear-cut. Medicare for all. Fast and free buses. We don't want politicians that sound like they're wishy-washy or flip-flopping. Genuinely, it is a really tricky balance to strike. If you're trying to show that you're inclusive of many viewpoints and perspectives, or that you're very knowledgeable, I'd get why you'd think that nuance would be helpful. But most of the time, especially in electoral politics, it's just not. John Herman writes, "A leader who recognizes nuance may be be nice, but a nuanced campaigner is a bad campaigner. Nuanced proposals sound a lot like compromise. A politician steeped in nuance may appear not smart, but spineless. Many of us just hate politicians because they act like politicians. Watch any debate and it is infuriating to see candidates swerve questions, avoid giving any definitive responses, and waste our time with nothing but fluff. It's actually offensive. It is completely fair and right to demand clarity and consistency from our elected officials or from candidates. They make decisions that hugely impact our lives. We need to know where they stand. Do you accept corporate PAC money? Are you in favor of universal health care? Abolish ICE? Well, it's a complicated issue. It depends. Yes or no? And yes, I am aware a policy position can be simple, but I understand that the actual implementation of it is going to be a lot more complex. That's fine. We just want you to be straight up with us. Now I want to discuss the idea of moral clarity. This often comes up in the realm of news and journalism. The questions of like, should reporting be as objective and neutral as possible? My hot take is that objective reporting just doesn't exist, especially when you consider who owns these mega news conglomerates and what their interests are. But anyway, when news organizations get scared of appearing biased, they can swing too far in the opposite direction and become overly soft or forgiving. In so desperately trying to seem objective and balanced, they can lose their integrity, their sense of truth. Ben Smith writes, referencing Trump's 2016 term, his bigoted language and tactics shattered norms. Black reporters were joined by other journalists in pushing inside newsrooms and on Twitter for more direct language and less deference in covering the president. Mr. Sulzberger said, "We're not retreating from the principles of independence and objectivity. We just don't pretend to be objective about things like human rights and racism." And especially in the last decade, many journalists have been saying, hey, we need to stop with this both sides reporting. We have to operate from a place of moral clarity. And I agree, but I want to dig into the term moral clarity because it's actually pretty unclear. Historically in the US, the term moral clarity has long been owned by the conservatives. And often it's tied to religion because that offers many people their sense of a moral and ethical framework. We must have moral clarity. But in the last decade or so, more progressives have been using this term, which is notable. Is the left trying to reclaim moral clarity? Like, don't leave morality to the conservatives. And I get that. Regardless though, the term moral clarity doesn't mean anything specific. It's not an objective term. It's essentially saying we must do what is right, but obviously what's right depends on who you ask. Does having moral clarity mean being pro-America, pro-war, or being anti-imperialist? So it's just important to note that this phrase can be co-opted by anyone, any ideology that seeks to frame their position as morally correct. By the way, I talk about morality in a lot of my videos. I'm really interested in these questions of what we project morality onto. Recently, it's been a lot of topics involving cleanliness. And yeah, I typically disagree with moralizing those sorts of things. But at the same time, I do hope that my political stances are clear. And I think they do come across in my videos. I often do say things like blah, blah, blah is right. That's the right thing to do. And I stand by that. But yeah, in terms of language, it can be very nebulous. To add another little layer of messiness, often when people invoke moral clarity, they're actually referring to moral simplicity or moral certainty. These binaries of good versus evil, right versus wrong. According to Susan Neiman, who wrote a book on moral clarity,
it's conviction, it's the ability to reasonably persuade other people of moral positions, but it's something that can't be defined in absolutely general terms because what's important about moral clarity is you only get it case by case. Moral clarity is about looking at each particular case, looking at all the facts, looking at all the context, and working out your answers.
I wanted to include this section because I think a lot of people believe that moral clarity and nuance are mutually exclusive. You either have moral clarity, you know what is right and wrong, or you're calling for nuance. You're saying things are so complicated because clearly you lack moral clarity, right? But I disagree. And especially considering Neiman's interpretation of it, I would argue that pursuing moral clarity is supposed to be a complex process and it requires the consideration of nuance. Whereas again, I see moral certainty as more dichotomous black and white thinking. If you're getting all mixed up, me too. Right now, this moment, we are currently experiencing the headache of nuance in real time. Finally, we get to final thoughts, why we need nuance. The whole process of writing this video has really proven to me just how messy, complicated, and confusing the idea of nuance can be. We're not even talking about specific issues, just the idea, just the word. Yet, I still believe we do need nuance. And I think we have to resist the lure of black and white thinking. I think we're afraid to provide nuance or even allow space for it for fear of people thinking that we're in favor of something bad. If we lend any empathy, compassion, or understanding towards someone in the wrong, we risk being labeled as part of that bad group. Or again, maybe you're just perceived as being weak or unprincipled. I think this is an especially fraught issue for those of us on the left who really value justice and fighting for the issues we believe in. I'm gonna have to save this for another episode because it's a lot, but I've wanted to cover this topic for so long. Basically analyzing the puritanical tendencies on the left. Many people on the left have deconstructed or are deconstructing from strict religious upbringings, myself included, but we often still exhibit puritanical tendencies within our politics. We can end up unintentionally rebuilding many of these same frameworks, echoing the rigidity, perfectionism, and moral policing. You know, we're no longer saying you're gonna go to hell if you sin, but if you make a mistake or you have a bad take, you're a fake leftist, you're problematic, you're canceled, you're out of the group. And I find that so fascinating because again, I experience it within myself, okay? I have been guilty of this behavior and these kind of thought patterns for sure. It's really hard to have a strong sense of right and wrong. You want justice, but then you naturally get pulled into punishment, carceral thinking, which gets very dicey. And I always find myself wondering, like, do we ultimately care more about like being right or proving that someone else is wrong, punishing the bad? Or do we want to actually focus on pursuing what is gonna create the most net good? You know, I already have like 10 pages of notes for that, so hopefully I can pull it together someday. But going back to the issue of nuance on the internet, especially in this anti-intellectual atmosphere, with the decline of education and literacy skills, the temptation to fall into dichotomous thinking is so strong. It is the easiest, most straightforward. But I do believe that these strict binaries are not for the best. They make us more punishing, less forgiving. And I believe that allowing space for nuance, practicing our critical thinking skills, being discerning, and approaching life with a base of compassion and empathy, that is ultimately going to serve us better. Again, I am absolutely not saying to give up on your beliefs or even to waver, and you can absolutely still have deal breakers, politically or in relationships. There's still value in simple, straightforward statements, especially when it comes to activism and politics. Climate change is real. Trans people have always existed. The genocide in Gaza is genocide. Abedawale writes, to be clear, this is not about neutralizing reasonable debate or discussion. Topics like politics and systemic injustice demand robust conversation, but rather a safeguard against the reflexive need some people feel to declare others wrong. Posts increasingly take the tone of, if you do this, you suck. If you don't do that, you're a failure. I don't see the value in arguing with someone whose goal is less to communicate and more to assert dominance. Rarely do people engage with the text in good faith, extracting the parts they understand or find useful, while acknowledging the parts they do not. If our goal is to create a more welcoming, open-minded, understanding world, we've got to have space for nuance. Quickly, I want to shout out Khadijah and Lena Norms. These are two creators that I love. They have very strong opinions. They're definitely not afraid to speak their minds, yet their content is rooted in compassion and understanding. I specifically love when Khadijah says you can always change your mind. Such a simple thing, but again, especially here on the left, sometimes it doesn't feel like it's okay to change your mind. And that has given me comfort many times. And Lena, again, she's a very principled person, but she's not in the business of policing. She literally wrote Half-Ass Human about like the value of trying or doing something half-ass. It's better than not trying at all. We have to be more accepting of imperfection in ourselves and others. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed this little itty bitty, slightly nuanced take on nuance. I'm never gonna say the word nuance again. I'm very tired of it. No more nuance. Sorry. Thank you again for watching and stay tuned for future internet analysis videos. Okay, thanks. Bye.